Barnes & Noble. Books hold a magical power to transport you no matter where you are physically. Whether it's a tale of star-crossed lovers or a horror story based on real-life events, they truly hold a divine power over us. In my opinion, one of the most satisfying things in the world is the feeling of accomplishment when you turn to the last page of an amazing book. Ebooks are great, but there's nothing that beats the feeling of holding an actual paperback. To all the book lovers out there, here's another fairy tale of how the largest bookstore of all time began. And yes, this is based on a true story. If you're new to the channel, welcome to Business Unmasked, where we unmask the stories behind interesting and successful companies. Hit the like button so more people can hear stories like these, and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Now let's get to the unmasking. It's the exact principle that Barnes & Noble thrives on. The feeling of strolling through the aisles of a well-stocked bookstore is unbeatable. Barnes & Noble is now the most recognizable brick-and-mortar bookseller that operates in more than 625 stores nationwide and sells 190 million titles a year. Our story starts in the year 1873, Wheaton, Illinois, with Charles Montgomery Barnes, who decided to open a bookstore. He always loved books, and when the local college needed a restock, it was the perfect opportunity. The bookstore did fairly well in its time. Following Barnes, his son William took over the bookstore in 1902. A few years down the line, in 1917, William moved to New York City to partner up with fellow bookseller Gilbert Clifford Noble. Thus, Barnes & Noble was born. By 1932, their flagship Barnes & Noble store on Fifth Avenue was selling books of all kinds. Funnily enough, that's also where most New York City-based movies are filmed, so it basically felt like walking into a real-life movie set. Barnes & Noble around the 1940s developed a revolutionary layout which was a complete game changer. The concept was called Booketeria, and they were first in line to execute it. It's very similar to the concept of a cafeteria. The customers would approach an employee who would fill out a sales slip while another clerk was packaging their book order, and the next one was handling the money to complete the transaction. This flow of service, similar to a cafeteria, was very time efficient. A bookstore that's as old as Barnes & Noble is bound to set a few trends. They were one of the first bookstores to interlace music with reading by introducing the concept of background music into the world of books through Muzak. Nowadays, we hear pop culture or rap when we enter a mall, but back then it was the classic Muzak. This was probably not intended to be a marketing move on their end, but it resulted in maximizing their sales to a great extent because the customers felt soothed by the gentle classical music that greeted them when they entered the store. Later on, they added elaborate speaker systems that played music, news updates, sports news, and much more. They found that playing upbeat music offset employee fatigue and gave them a great energy boost, which encouraged them to work harder, proving Barnes & Noble not only cared about their customers but also their employees. However, every fairy tale has to have a villain, whether it's an evil sorceress or a cruel sister, and in this story, it was Barnes & Noble outliving its brand name. By the 1960s, it started entertaining offers from buyers, and like every fairy tale, a Prince Charming came in to save the day. Barnes & Noble didn't exactly have a prince, but they had a Riggio. Leonard Riggio, a part-time college student at New York University who also worked at the campus bookstore during his free hours, was frustrated to find out that he would no longer be allowed to oversee the campus bookstore's operations. He couldn't work there anymore, so he dropped out of college to open a competing bookstore named the Student Book Exchange in Greenwich. The bookstore was a huge success. His business grew so much that in 1971, he acquired the Barnes & Noble trade name and flagship, which was at its own location at the time, in Manhattan. He had a huge advantage. He already had a thriving bookstore, which meant loyal and dedicated book lovers who were aware of his brand and regularly visited the store. That meant rebranding for the failing Barnes & Noble name, a chance for its survival. So yes, a college dropout bought bought Barnes & Noble for $1.2 million. That's a pretty impressive addition to one's resume if you ask me. Riggio had a lot of cool tricks up his sleeve to promote sales in Barnes & Noble. He sold books to everyone, whether they wanted to read them or not. When Riggio opened an 80,000 square foot annex near his Fifth Avenue location in 1975, books at the time were being sold by the pound. This generic approach to the books by the customers was not to read the books but to fill in empty bookshelves and space in the different racks around various corners in the house. So the books were more often a decorative item. So it wasn't your regular book lovers buying bestsellers off the shelf. It was more the method of selling the books that aren't bought as much as the others. These books gave a vintage home decor vibe and weren't as hot selling as the bestsellers. Another exceptional strategy Riggio implemented was welcoming in people when the local newsstand denied them. Barnes & Noble wanted the customers to feel like they could stay in their store forever. Newsstands didn't take kindly to people who weren't interested in purchasing their books and magazines. Barnes & Noble, however, early on let all types of customers in regardless of their interest in buying a book. They let customers stretch around and relax for a while, maybe even enjoy a coffee, read a magazine, or wander around to check out the store. Riggio's plan once again hit the jackpot. This boosted sales so much that Riggio found that it was easier and cheaper to install benches, telephone booths, and bathrooms, making it easier and comfier for people to linger on. While doing so, he received plenty of criticisms from the traditional bookstore owners who weren't ready for a full-fledged update yet. They warned Riggio, saying his store would become a glorified rest stop. Their complaints knew no bounds. However, Riggio in his heart knew he was right and stuck with his new features. People were indeed browsing, staying extra hours, and even spending more if you gave them the space they needed. He later added armchairs, coffee, and cooking demonstrations, book reading, and signings too. He was on a roll. These updates attracted not only book lovers, but just people in general to come and chill and maybe buy a magazine, have a coffee or two, and hang out. This shot up sales, proving to be very profitable. In 1974, Barnes & Noble set another historic record. For the first time ever, a bookstore was advertised on television. They hired an ad agency called Gare Dubois to produce television spots for the New York City market. This was a first in the industry. Their tagline, of course, became an iconic catchphrase of all time. Like every fairy tale, Barnes & Noble got its own happy ending. It is currently the world's largest retail bookseller and leading retailer of content, digital media, and education products. Comment down below and let us know if you have ever bought any books from Barnes & Noble. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It does wonders for the YouTube algorithm, so more people can see our videos and so that you can be notified when we launch our next video. We try and put out at least one new one per week, and as you can imagine, the research and editing alone of these type of videos takes us close to 18 hours. So we would really appreciate it if you could also check out our Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can support our work. We produce over 12 videos per month, so that is literally 8 cents per video. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at our next unmasking.